peek in the pot, Culinary Bytes from History. We have three speakers on the panel. I will introduce them and request them to take their seats on the stage. Begin by introducing Rakesh Raghunathan, who is a food historian and MasterChef India judge in Tamil. He's a South Indian culinary ambassador who blends history, culture, and storytelling into immersive culinary experiences. He travels a lot and researches traditional cuisines and documents them in acclaimed TV shows, bringing food and art together. Thank you so much, Mr. Rakesh Raghunathan. Please come on the stage. We next have Mr. Sadaf Hussain, chef, author, and podcaster, two-time TEDx speaker, top contestant on the MasterChef India 2016 show, worked with 22 plus restaurants, explores food beyond taste, delving into its lore, its tradition, and cultures. He curates dining experiences, spotlighting Bihar and Jharkhand's lesser-known cuisines. Please come up on stage. So as you can see, we already have two speakers associated with MasterChef. So a true masterclass that awaits us. And to guide us through this masterclass, we have a true maestro on food, Mr. Pushpesh Pant. Pushpesh Pant is a historian, academic, and food critic who has written a lot on food. Very famously, the author of India, the Cookbook in 2010, and more recently, a book, From the King's Table to Street Food. It's only fitting that after lunch, we begin with some serious food for thought. Please come up on stage, sir. May I request Professor Rakesh Pant to come up on stage and hand over the stalls. So over to you, sir, Mr. Pushpesh Pant.
I think this is a bit unfair. I'm sandwiched in the middle between two people I greatly admire, and I dare say, despite the difference in age, respect. And I think the only reason I can justify my being here is that I started as Mr. Raghavan, Dr. Raghavan actually, as a student of history. Then the path diverged and I did something else till the food bug bit me. And since the food bug bit me, history got bypassed, so I must make an immediate disclaimer. I have nothing to do with history as a professional historian. I taught history only for 2 years in my life. That was way back in between 1969 and 71 in Ramjas College in Delhi University, so that is history. Also, the India Cookbook is referred here, which makes me feel very odd. So as if that's the only thing I have done in life which is worth mentioning, that also is history beyond. I'm here because I thought, and I'm not a moderator, so that's where I thought that it was a little unfair to ask me to begin. Actually, the title of the session was what got me very excited, is peeping in the pot. And you peep in the pot to do what? To whiff an aroma and decide what is cooking at home today? Or you try to peep and say, you know, I'm a diabetic, I have blood pressure, which I have both actually, and I can't be allowed to eat this what the others are eating. Or there could be a whiff of aroma. Very interesting story which my aunt, who's a very famous Hindi writer now dead, writes. Our ancestral maternal house was across the road from Norman Pant's house, whose sister married Liaquat Ali Khan, the first Prime Minister of Pakistan. So she said ki unke ghar se, the whiffs of the pulavs and kormas coming made us drool in our house. So I think that gene has continued, and I can't resist the temptation of peeping into other people's pots and see. The other image which bothers me is that what happens. Actually, I should indulge in a bit of self-promotion, Sadaf. I dare not say this to him. He never does that. the two of us are practitioners of the same not so gentle art. Uh, Now the interesting part is this, that I'm working on a book on design in food. Now, that's because another university was very kind. They have a department of design, and they said, would you like to talk about design and food? And then there's a friend who was a cardiologist in Delhi, who again, like so many of us, stopped cardiology, super specialist, went to Italy to do not food designing, not food plating, not etc. Now, that was interesting. I said, what do you do when you design food? But that's beside the point. Let's get back to the pots and peeping into the pot. Why not peep in a pan? Just before I came here, I had a lovely pasta at a School of European Pastry and Culinary Arts, which Chef Bali runs. Parvinder Bali has just been to on an expedition to Jharkhand and reclaiming he's not the only one reclaiming the lost heritage. Lots of non-Jharkhandis are beating him to his game, and if he doesn't look sharp, it's terrible. So why not peep in a pan? Then again, this place is full of Punjabi bites. One likes to avoid, one has not traveled to Bangalore to eat Punjabi bites. But then there is too much paneer, and why not the tawa? Breakfast mein agar tawa hai, why not peep into somebody's tawa? And what is happening? So then it got me back to that. Ek handi hai. There is a shape of a handi. And then I, who love cooking, who's gluttonous, cooks every day or makes somebody cook every day, more like it, in a pressure cooker. Now, the pressure cooker is again a colonial conspiracy, as everybody knows. So what happened to the Swadeshi non-urlis and the idli makers and the poot makers? And he's fantastic. He's done a program in Hindi on South Indian food explaining it. I wish I could even pronounce the names of utensils which are there. Or why not the bamboo hollow in which the Northeasterners put their unmentionable pork mince and pigeon mince? Nobody dare mention mutton mince, which is the bovine relative of a holy cow. So we'll not get into that. But the point is that the moment you peep into something, the design comes in. Design in food is not restricted to what you are cooking, what shape your paratha is. We had a very interesting discussion last night over dinner. कि हमारी चपाती तो मालवा में was folded like a handkerchief and had greased ghee on the face, not in the bottoms. How is it that you vulgar North Indians, above Malwa, do this, that the bottom is greased, the top is greased? Makhan lagana is a very dirty word, but we'll leave it at that. So what I'm interested in talking to you with is not my new book, which has come out. I would love to. The publisher would lynch me if I said I went to Bangalore and said I'm not interested in what happens to that book. It interests me, but it is always the work in progress which keeps you passionate, keeps you almost obsessed with it. So the design of things which have something to do with food interests me greatly. Now the Prestige and the other Hawkins and everybody, all the makes, and they are not the sponsors, so one can freely, independently express one's opinion, have to come out with a pressure cooker shaped like a handi, which is more akin to Indian utensils. We were talking about Erica nut, and there's Madhava here, who's the only Erica nut grower I have come across in my life. And when we are talking of sarotas, there is a great folk song in Banaras, which is Sarota Kha Bhulai Pyari Nandoiya. Literally translated, it means brother-in-law, where have you left behind the nutcracker? Now, the brother-in-law is not a nutcracker. It's the poor husband who's a cuckold. The song runs something like this. Chela panvadiya se naina lad gaiyan, मैं बेचारी पान खाऊं चूना चाटे सैया. And it goes on like this. Interestingly, this song is not the folk song which Malini Avasthi sings. I discovered recently it is sung by Kishore Kumar. Lyrics are not by Shailendra Purabia, but by Majroo Sultanpuri. And the music, if memory serves me right, is S.D. Burman. Crazy. And this Sarota, you go to Dinkar Kelkar Museum in Pune, where we had that fantastic Lit Fest second ed, has a whole display of Sarotas. And his friend and my old student from JNU, Pradeep Chakravarti, has done the splendor that was Tanjavuru. And there is a Sarota there, the nutcracker, which has a male figure on top and a female figure at the bottom. And when you chop the nut, they have bliss, Brahmanand Sahodar, things of that kind takes place. Now, It might also soon pass into history because I think the kind of dispensation on free speech we have, you can't hurt somebody's feeling by talking about these things in public. The last thing I want to do before I shut up and ask the people whom I have come to listen to, I was very upset about a news item which I read on the plane as I was traveling to this place. There was a fracas in South Asian University because non-vegetarian food was served in an exclusive separate mess on the day of Mahashivratri, which hurt the feelings of people who assaulted the other people in the other mess. Now, we were talking how biryani divides and how this gentleman ended up here with a splitting headache last night was because he had kept awake a whole night on Mahashivratri and enjoying Mahashivratri. But he was not forcing and he's of course a Vaishnav by tradition, by birth and belonging to the Chakravarti lineage. But then his Shivratri celebrations whole night only gave him a splitting headache. It did not give me a stomachache or bruises on my body. So I think the problem with food and history is what Amit said, that food not only unites, but it divides. Just before coming here, I had the other stupidity thrust down my throat. I deserve it, I think. A lady said, can I write a blurb for a fellow chef's cookbook? And the lady's blurb said, this book is brilliant. It brings together the recipes of Akhand Bharat to unite us in the Sanatan way of life, etc., etc. I will not quote the whole thing. But the interesting part is this, the recipes in the book were not the recipes of undivided India. They were turkey taco deconstructed. They were chicken pate on toast. These things are not part of the Sanatan heritage at all. So what is Sanatan heritage is an interesting question. What is undivided India is an interesting question. There was a Hindu dynasty which ruled in Afghanistan is well known. There was Majapahit, Srivijaya, Shailendra in Southeast Asia before the birth of Christ, 2 centuries before that. There was Champa, Yunnan, Bali, Suvarnadweep. There was a great temple of Angkor Wat, and there is history all along. So I think food is history, and as it's the history, as the Honorable Vice Chancellor said, it is a dialogue between past, present, and future. But in contemporary India, I think what upsets me most is the Macbeth's first scene, the three witches cauldron. So you are not peeping into a cauldron, but there is bubbling toil there. I'll end with that, and I will begin. I'm acting like a moderator already, but would you like to begin with something? You have been a great one at relating food, past, present.
How many of us are hungry here after listening to him? I know we had just had lunch. This is what you can do to people. I mean, it's not just food that you talk about, but bring in the entire history behind it and make people salivate. Not done. Talking about the past, and rightly so, peek into the pot. What I am reminded of when I peek into a pot, I mean, in our homes, there would be several such pots, hidden away in the attic, in the storeroom. But when you open it, you will find these, that's obviously not been used for many, many decades. But you'll find these scratch marks. You'll find the black color from the soot. And it will take you back in time to someone who was using it, who was making that one particular dish. It could be the tamarind rice, or it could be a fish curry, or whatever it is. But it'll immediately take you back in time and make you feel nostalgic. So, when I peek into a pot, it is many years ago, I did, as I was dabbling with so many things, I was trying to figure out what it is that I want to do in food. I did something called Utensils and Stories, where I just asked people to bring their utensils that they have, which they don't use, just bring it here and engage in conversation as to what that utensil reminds you of. So many people went nostalgic. In fact, it was emotional for some people when they spoke about people who used to use it, who are not there anymore, who used to make those recipes which they have not documented today. It was a great way for storytelling. So food lends itself in the most beautiful way. So when I peek into a pot that is very, very old, that is not used today. These are the imageries that it evokes. But a current pot that is cooking, especially when I'm entertaining people, it gives me a certain amount of expectation, because there is that expectation among people as to what this guy is going to put out. And not just that, when you open it with that whiff that you get, of course, there is nostalgia, but you also want to understand the different layers to that cooking process, right? To make a rasam is very, very complicated, right? I mean, we talk about French cooking. With due respects to French cooking, there is a lot of science and complexity involved in making a good rasam. So when you look at that, you obviously look at the different layers to it, the kind of clarity that eventually provides, and that sense of expectation which is there. So that is a little bit of the past and the present.
That's very interesting. Could you chip in at this stage, Sadaf bhai? Because you also have one foot planted in Jharkhand, one now in Lucknow. In between, a little globe trotting doesn't hurt. He flew from Delhi to Lucknow, Lucknow to Delhi, Delhi to Bangalore, and flies right after this session back to Delhi and Lucknow. So when you travel like this and say, if it's Thursday, I must be there. तो खाने के बारे में, how do you connect the past with the present? Future will come to perhaps in the second round.
Thank you. I think we start with the same topic of peeping in the pot. And I feel like a pot has so much of mysticism, mystery. A pan or a kadahi, a tawa, not a kadahi, a tawa, you can see, okay, with kebab or roti, whatever you're cooking on that. But it's the pot which gives you, like, for example, if you're cooking something which has nice aroma, you always like, oh, what are you cooking? And you will try to peep in, which we actually did when we went to eat. Had it been like a flat laid out, there was salad, for example, which was laid out in the kitchen. We didn't see that, like, yeah, it's just salad. But everything else, which were covered, both of us were just looking at it, okay, what's in it, what's in it? Because that's what peeping in a pot means. And I think for me, peeping in pot means multiple things. Somebody who likes me, who like to find out the stories, you can actually connect this story, who was cooking from that utensil, whether it's a man cooking or a woman cooking, whether it's a man of a certain community or a woman of a certain community. The reason of man versus woman is because if men has an exclusive bartan, it will be, when usually considering in a regular patriarchal family, you'll have a men cooking once every week, which will become Sunday mutton curry. That today the men of the house will cook, and usually the women who are in charge, they will kick them out, saying go cook in your separate kitchen, which mostly would be on the chat, because otherwise men usually don't know where the masalas are in the kitchen. My brother never does. If he, and like, now I've moved to Delhi, say to Lucknow, he's in Delhi, and he gives me a call that, hey, listen, where's the elaichi? Like, it's right there. You have to switch on the video camera, and then like, yeah, right there. So usually when people don't cook, the bartan, of course, will have a nice story to tell. It will be like prim posh versus a utensil which you cook on a regular basis. It will have, if you're cooking in a earthen pot, for example, and if you use the same pot to cook kheer and to cook meat, the kheer will have the meat flavor and the meat will have the kheer flavor. So I think that's what peeping in pot me means. And when I find something, history from that perspective, stories, oral stories from that perspective, I think that's where I bring these past to the present. Now, in the present, I feel like most of us are busy selling nostalgia as well. They're like, nostalgia has fun. Sure, your dosa ice cream has uniqueness to it. There is lots of cheese on on the food right now. But there was some really interesting food which happened in the 90s or before that, and that's what a lot of people like us are bringing back. It helps connect that past to present, because when you cook something like that, you're connecting with the people who grew up in that era, and then they say, oh, I used to have it. Not anymore because of many reasons. One reason could be economics as well, that the ingredient cost has gone up, so nobody wants to use it, or it's banned. So that's what the reason. Versus people who are in the current generation, they want to see, oh, this is something different beyond our regular Maggie. So that's past and present.
This is very interesting because what we were discussing, Rakesh, in some other context was the relationship between food and music. And music has changed. It's not like the old classical music, Khayal Gaiki or Karnataka Purity. T.N. Krishna is getting it on the neck because of certain insults and hurt sentiments of great Meera Bhajan singer. But when Meera Bhajan singer was singing Meera Bhajan singer, nobody was feeling hurt that in a Devdasi lineage somebody was doing that. I remember the Halabalu when the Caravan published the cigarette smoking, gazing in the mirror picture of Emma Lakshmi. So, but they, though are the known sinners, the Pahalka people, the Caravan people, nobody takes them seriously as historians. But I feel very strongly about this. Food changes. And Sadaf was making a point that you have a shared nostalgia about food people ate. My problem is that in any house, probably three generations interact. The grandparents don't stay with the children in non-joint families. The Hindu joint family, incidentally, is only a tax dodge in tax laws. There is no such thing existed ever. But then if the father, mother, and children, even in a nuclear family, are staying together, they are eating the same food as long as the kids have not gone to the boarding school. They have not started living on their own. So I don't know whether it is a question of nostalgia or a shared taste which you grew up. I'll give you an example which I find very odd. I came to Delhi in 1964-65. I was 18 years old, and my memories of food in the city are the history of the city. There was only one high-rise building, the Delhi Minar, DDA headquarters. One was coming up on the Barakhamba Road, the Statesman building ke opposite. And otherwise, Delhi was more or less what it was at the time of independence, with few changes of the PWD vulgarities of Krishi Bhavan, Rail Bhavan, and they are being pulled down. Although they were not colonial conspiracies, but they were conspiracies of the Nehruvian, Lumpen, urban, etc., whatever it is. So the food was quite, and he said something about economics. So that made me think that history of our cities is the history of food. You come to Delhi, the first meal I had in Delhi as an independent person was a 70 paisa lunch, 4 tandoori roti, free ki dal, half plate sabzi in a dhaba called Azad Dhaba in Shankar Market. I went for nostalgic reasons to that dhaba. The same meal is about 170 rupees now, and in restricted quantities. That is the economic factor. But the point is not that. There was an influx of Punjabis, and everybody thinks that the paneer and the tandoor came with Punjabis only. Or they think this South Indian invasion of North India through idli, dosa, which you don't like at all, reducing everything to lowest common denominator. But we forget the Madrasis who came to Delhi when New Delhi was being built. The joke then was, Bhitar Madrasi, Bahar Chaprasi. You negotiate the two devils, then you get your work done in official work. You have migrants like V.P. Menon, who came as a matriculate and ended up as a secretary to the Home Minister Sardar Patel and integration of princely states. You have people like K.R. Narayanan, who came and was VCA there, another Malayali. So Malayalis exercise power more than the Tamilians, contrary to the Tambrans would like to believe. But the interesting part is that these people who came from Rajasthan are the ones who founded the Delhi cloth mill, and they are the ones who are the Bikaner Walas, the Haldirams, Jhajar ka Halwai, Shahi Halwai, Ghante Wala, blah blah. And you have even the Punjabis who came when Shah Jahan built New Delhi. Not, then it was the New Delhi, the walled city, Shah Jahanabad. So they were called Punjabi Saudagarans, the family to which Sadiya Dehelvi belonged. And they looked down on the Delhi Muslims. Kya? Their language is wrong. Kya kar riya, kya kar raha? Rumali roti kehte hai. Rumali roti is a patch of cloth in the pajama. Jisko asan kehta hai darzi. In logo ko bolne ka tamiz nahi, khane ka tamiz nahi. But there is a very interesting book, I think is not quite a history book, it's a part memoir of a gentleman called Siddiqui, Smoke Without Fire, published in good times by Sheila Dikshit's Urdu Academy in Delhi simultaneously with Pakistan. And I'll end again with this, but this haunts me. This gentleman left Delhi after partition at the age of 21 or so. And he says that he stayed in the Jama Masjid area, that there was a smell divide. You walked past Kallu Halwai's shop and you had smells changing. It was no longer heen, asafoetida, puri, aloo ki sabzi. It was kebabs being roasted. It was ghee mithai being done. And this divide, this smell divide continues. So the food divided people into precincts of residence, but they did not fight. They coexisted harmoniously. The kebabs lived happily with the Aloo Puri Bedwi. One last thing. There's another historical novel by Ahmad Ali, a Pakistani Foreign Service officer, Twilight in Delhi. The protagonist in that book treads the same ground as Siddiqui does in Smoke Without Fire. And there is a continuity. The Muslims did not only eat kebabs. There is a description where it says, like in Zunoon, there is a Sufi saint who says massacre will happen now after 1857. But what he wants to eat is, he says, give me some parathas and methi ki sabzi. And then he describes what was being cooked inside a Muslim household. Meer's wife was cooking pumpkin and aloo ki sabzi. So they did eat what would we call purely vegetarian meal. So I think the history of food is the history of cities, history of migration, history of generations. Would you see this kind of a change in Chennai? Because my publisher has got this series, the food in history in the city of joy, and my humble contribution comes from Delhi. I wish I had researched it better, but then I think somebody like you doing history of Chennai through food would be an eye-opener.
So when you first say food of Chennai, the first thing, let's say, I mean, back in the day when they had to show it in cinemas and they had to establish that it was Madras, they would show the central station. Today, if they had to show Chennai, they will first say, show you filter coffee. Then there'll be one image of, steaming hot dosas and idlis coming out, and maybe rose milk. That's kind of made it into the culinary fabric today. But sadly, if I were to ask even any one of you, what do you think is the cuisine of Madras? What would you tell me? Anyone here? Curd rice. Okay. Yes, please. Yes. Sorry? Can't hear. Pongal. Sambar rice. Avial. Okay. So if you actually look at it, many centuries ago, Madras as we know it was Madrasapattinam, and the entire region was inhabited by the fishermen community. So there's definitely a lot of seafood. Going even further, I mean, if you date it even before that, I can go back to Sangam literature, which talks extensively about different kinds of regions which were classified based on climatic conditions, topography, the kind of whether it was fertile. So you had the fertile regions, you had the mountainous regions, you had the dry arid regions, you had coastal regions, and Madras would come under coastal regions. And there was a poet or a bard who would go around these places and recording his observations in what he saw in the fisherman community. What did he see in the place where it was fertile? What were they drying meats? Were they cultivating rice? In the mountainous region, there were the indigenous communities who were cultivating millets, so on and so forth. So Madras was all about seafood many years ago. Of course, you had other things that were cultivated also, but nobody talks about the fishermen community because I think for them it was not just sustenance, it was all about preservation also, the different kinds of methods in which they would store seafood. But then when you come back to the times of the East India Company, one of the things that actually originated in Madras or wherever the East India Company set up was the Anglo-Indian cuisine. Right? Like nobody, you have the Madras curry powder, you have the Malagatani soup, which is nothing but a melagu tanni, which is pepper water in Tamil. It was a rasam. Of course, they jazzed it up by several notches. Instead of adding tamarind, they added a wedge of lemon. Instead of mixing it with rice, they would add like a spoonful of rice inside and give it to you. And that went on to become a global phenomenon. Like everywhere the colonials ruled, they had a different variation of the Malagatani soup. There are references to the Malagatani soup made with rabbit meat, with peacock, with elephant meat. so on and so forth. Right? So that is the history that we don't talk about. I mean, one thing gets written and sadly that becomes history. um, uh, I mean, the communities in Madras, if after the East India Company came in, you had so many people, so many communities that came in. You had the Black Town, you had the White Town. People in the Black Town, they came from the Komiti Chettis, Beri Chettis, you had the Gujaratis. Before that, you had the Armenians, Parsis, Jews. All of them contributed in some way to the culinary and cultural fabric of Madras. So Madras cuisine is probably something that I would say is an amalgamation of all these different influences that the city has seen over several centuries, and we cannot stereotype it to idli, vada, dosa, and filter coffee.
Before I toss this at Sadaf, I would like you to react to one more thing. You jumped from Sangam literature and came straight to East India Company. My problem is that in between, there were the Pallavas, the Pandyas, the early Cholas, the later Cholas, and just concentrating on, I mean, when the Prime Minister had to entertain he was taken to Mamallapuram. And Mamallapuram was the port where from the Indian trade to Southeast Asia took place. To rekindle memories, that's where the temple architecture begins, the 5 Pandavrathas, from rock-cut caves to sculpted temples, the shore temple. You have the Gangavataranam in the fissured rock, which had a fracture, which was used brilliantly by an architect to make the water flow down in monsoon. My concern is that when we use the word Madras, it is not only Madrasi Pattanam, it is not only Mylapore, it is not only the fort, yes. If you talk in terms of Madras, the footprint of food includes the Madras presidency. Yes. It would include parts of North Kerala, Kasargode, yes. It would include the bits of Andhra Pradesh, it would have some of, let's not say Karnataka, but some parts of this geography would be included in the Tamil expansionist thing. But when the Cholas were there, the food probably changed so much that when Madras came, these influences were there as well. So you would have the sambar, and then there would be Tanjore, and there would be the Modi scripts, and the story may or may not be true, but either way you can't please either the Tamilians or the Marathas at the same time. So
yes. So, I mean, this is something that I put out recently on my social media. There was this whole thing about sambar being invented by the Tanjavur Marathas in Tanjavur. This King Sambhaji went inside. One day he couldn't find kokum. Instead, he added the tamarind, and then he couldn't find masoor dal or something, and then he added tur dal. And since he was a great cook, and since he concocted this was named after him. But sadly, that's not, maybe he would have created something, but something like the sambar has always been around. I mean, we are talking about Tanjavur Maratha history, which is about 300, 400 years ago. But well before that, in the times of Sangam literature, there are references to tur dal. There are references to, a tamarind-based curry that was being made. There are references to something called an Amrita Kalavai, which is a one-pot meal that resembles the sambar sadaf. See, Sangam never recorded recipes. It was always fleeting references, and with that you can only infer. Even today, when you drive across South India on the, especially like in Tamil Nadu, when you drive on the freeway, you will find tamarind trees on both sides. You will find pepper, rice, moong dal have always been around, and a classic example to that is the temple prasadam, which has stood the test of time. So you can only say with all of these that, yeah, it may not have been called sambar, but something like the sambar has always been around.
That's pretty convincing, and we'll move on to Sadaf. I think my prejudice about the Maratha origins has something to do with my surname. The ancestors ran away from the battlefield of Panipat and took refuge in the hills. Continuing with this theme of what we eat is intricately related with the history of the cities or kasbas where we live in. So I would not like you to go to Pataliputra, the original capital of your noble province of, where the original Vishwaguru started. But Lalu also claimed that jab tak samosa mein aloo hai, tab tak Bihar mein lalu hai. When neither happened to be a prophecy which came to truth, because samosas now have, with the unmentionable biff to kapi to cauliflower to eggs to noodles, everything samosa has.
Bindi.
And Bihar ki politics mein bhi aloo.
Bindi bhi hai.
Ji, bilkul. So what I would like to ask you is that if you chose to talk of a city which has changed in your own experience, and where you could see history in real time taking place. So when we were been abusing the poor momo, which has hollandaise sauce, which has mayonnaise sauce, which has chocolate inside, and we are talking of the Punjabi invasion of the rest of India. We are keeping silent tactfully in this garden city about the South Indian invasion, where it has taken from Ladakh to Andaman. The same tiffin items are there. But when you talk in terms of a city, Lucknow, let's say, where you are parked at the moment, again, as he would say, Lucknow is not really a very old city. It's a 300-400-year-old. Before that, there was Faizabad. But Faizabad again was dating back to the invaders, aggressors, the builders of the Babri Masjid, Ayodhya, and so on. So the point is not that we are not focusing on 400 years. We are not doing history 3,000 years before the birth of Christ and so on. But let's concentrate on Lucknow, which you have experienced, and the city. The Bada Imam Bada is there, the Chota Imam Bada is there, the Rumi Darwaza is there. What else remains in terms, residency is there, Clementia is there, beautiful site for a festival. But would you say that the food in the city tells you a story of these monuments and the people who lived there? I'll prompt you, like the chat prompt, so you have your time. I know you have to catch a flight, so you can, जितना भी फैलना चाहें, to use the Hindi phrase, आप फैल सकते हैं इसके बाद. You go to Calcutta, and you talk in terms of a Kolkata biryani. And the Kolkata biryani is ki jo Wazir Ali Shah hai, he has become an impoverished man. He didn't have money, so he put potatoes and boiled eggs in his biryani. Nothing could be farther from truth. The man who could carry with him 2,000 dancers, parikhana chala rahe the, Matiya Burj mein, the beardless youth were entertaining him, bawarchis were there, he had a menagerie of animals which is 2,000 strong. Wahan se ek baag bhag ke nikal ke Belur Math tak chala gaya tha. He was not short of money. He was advised by his physician to cut down the meat in the humid climate of Kolkata and lighten it. So he added some potatoes and he added some boiled eggs. Now, potatoes were not a poor man's food then. It was not Lalu ka samosa. There was a princess ransom. They had just been gifted by Queen Elizabeth's envoy to Jahangir, as a pouch of potatoes was gifted. It was almost like a princess ransom. So, Kolkata ka jo khana hai, usme kuch asar Lucknow ke khane ka people claim. You go to Murshidabad, which we had the misfortune of traveling together. And with I say misfortune because our host was a strict vegetarian Marwadi who invited us, and we thought that we would eat good Marwadi vegetarian food, but what we got was a cheap imitation of the paneer varieties of Punjabi food, and which was neither here nor there. So we tried to make our escape and go to the Purana Shahr and eat the Murshidabadi khana, or Shahri ka khana, Shahr wali cuisine it is called. It was difficult to find traces of that. So I would like to say that what would happen if the Lucknowi food was not there? How would the history of the feudal culture, tehzeeb, nazakat, nafasat, because food went from Awadh to Hyderabad, Awadh to Calcutta, Faizabad to Awadh, and everybody half who considers himself halfway civilized would say, हाँ हम लखनऊ के रहने वाले हैं. He may be staying in Sadila, a village near Sadila, or Hardoi, or Unnao, मगर कहेगा वही कि हम तो लखनऊ के रहने वाले हैं. तो लखनऊ के खाने का impact on the history, not only of food, but of mores, of culture, etiquette elsewhere.
First, in Lucknow, there's a thing. अगर आप यूपी में हैं, if you're in UP, you are either from Lucknow, you're in Noida, or you're from UP. There's no other thing. Everybody else is like, Lucknow people do not believe there's anything else beyond Lucknow. Like, everything is UP. Lucknow is Lucknow. It's like people who study at DU, Delhi University, right? You ask them which school you are from, which university you're from. They say, I'm from Stephens College, Hindu College, and some of these big names. Everything else becomes DU.
नहीं यहाँ हंसराज के चाहने वाले बहुत हैं. यहाँ हंसराज के चाहने वाले बहुत.
Or Hansraj as well. So big names, they're from there. Otherwise, yeah, DU. The entire South Campus is DU. So it's that. Either you're from Lucknow or you're from UP. Now, food itself, I feel like the times when you live in, history keeps on changing, and that history impacts the food as well. Whether you want to force the history down your people's throat or it just exists. What I genuinely love about this section is that there's this is my observation, understanding. Every time there's a force to dismantle, destroy something of history, there's one more force which tries to establish it as much as possible. And it could be subtle, it could be silent, all over the top. I was actually doing, and I'll come to that the question as well. I was doing an article a couple of days back in Delhi's Shaheen Bagh. If you have been to Delhi's Shaheen Bagh, relatively new area, 1960s, 70s.
For more than food.
Known for more than
food.
food.
The ruthless suppression of civil liberties.
Exactly.
And Supreme Court bending down on its knees.
Correct. So that's why it got popular. But it was a very relatively new space where a Muslim guy bought an entire property and called it Shaheen because Shaheen has a good name, to Shahi hai. And then it became popular during CAA. Now, if you think of CAA as an anti-protest or anti-CAA protest, it was about not other out, right? We equally belong to the community. So that's a very over-the-top fight. But now if you go to Shaheen Bagh, there's no CAA happening anymore. The entire lane has now transformed into a food lane, a food alley, where you would find the same guys who sat to say, we are India, are now selling the food, which is also called We Are India. But now in India, this is Akhand Bharat, by the way. In Shaheen Bagh, you find Akhand Bharat. You have Afghanistan coming in there. You have Afghan food. You have Pakistan food. You have got Turkey food as well. Bangladeshi तो हमारा ही है वो तो है ही but Turkey is also because Akhand Bharat, we want to bring Turkey as well. Persian, all that has become the same. So this is a very silent protest in that sense, that we are India as well. Now that's why I said that it's always that. Now when you look at,
I said I will interrupt you for one brief moment. काश आपके मुंह से ये भी निकलता कि पाकिस्तान भी हमारा ही है या हम पाकिस्तान के ही हैं.
नहीं हम तो लड़ते जाते हैं. Pakistan and we keep fighting. वैसे तो हमारा ही है. अखंड भारत सब है हमारा. तो but now if you think of in Lucknow, and recently there's a bread called roti, and it gets served with something called khagina, very fancy thing. It's a breakfast, by the way, in Lucknow. Anybody who wants to take a wild guess of what is rogani and khagina from the epiglottis? Anybody who wants to take a wild guess? Huh? Bal? Pan? No, pan is pan. Huh? Eggs, correct. No, not sabzi. Eggs. It's just egg omelette and paratha. Nothing else. So, but think of rogani. Rogani comes from word rogan, which is fat, which you can make it two ways. Number one, if you are a rich person, you can add fat, like ghee, etc. in it, and it becomes rogani. It's a softer bread. But if you are like my mother, then you would use the leftover gravy, which also has a rogan, and you knead it in the atta, and you get a rogani. And then in the morning, whatever you want to have. Now, in Lucknow, the version that I have had so far was a very simple rogani roti, whole wheat, and then you paired with khagina. Masala khagina, by the way, not just any khagina. But khaginas are not masala, they are just egg poached. Recently, I had rogani at another hotel called Charminar, which was soft naan, but he called it rogani. Now, and that's what the thing is, that when you look at food from that perspective, there's also the understanding of people, that, this could mean that. I remember working on a dish which was served at Bazm-e-Akhir, the last gathering during Bahadur Shah Zafar, which was called the Badshaahi Korma something. Pura naam pura lamba tha. Uske andar, there was a gravy, had khoya, mawa, or the thickened milk, or evaporated milk rather. So that, and it had very rich gravy, very rich. Now, of course, you'll find the same thing with cream, but this one had that. And other thing that was served on that table was something called gaudida, or the gauzaban. I didn't try making gauzaban because that gives...
You better not, because both translate as ox's tongue and cow's eye, bull's eye.
Correct.
So, wo to gadbad hai usme.
So I only did gaudida.
Although the nice pieces of kanauji are dotted to make it look like bullseye,
Correct.
and cow zaban is shaped like
Zaban.
the cow's tongue,
Correct.
ox's tongue, but so is gobi, because the original word for gobi is go jiva,
Yeah.
the ox's tongue. But we forget, there is no Vediki hinsa.
Oh, that's Satvik. So that's what the understanding itself of what you read, how much you read, and where do you draw the line, like how far back you want to. Now, for example, that Rogani has changed. Um, the ways of the purest would call anybody who's made korma, anybody who knows about kaliya or korma or salam. Okay. Exclude. You're okay. So within korma, kaliya, there's a usage of haldi. The purist would say, oh, we don't add haldi versus you add haldi. Korma in the past never had haldi in it, never had turmeric in it. The purist would say, but kaliyas have turmeric. Korma doesn't.
A Kashmiri kalia would not. The kalia in Kashmir would mean something else. It would mean something else in Lucknow. और अगर उत्तराखंड में, if you are in Uttarakhand, जब भी गोश्त पक रहा है आप कलियां पका रहे हैं, कलियां रांध रहे हैं. Is a smaller goat, kid goat meat being cooked is there.
So that's another different. So I'm just saying, it's an interesting thing of understanding the food from that perspective, how things keep on changing. So when you use food, when you said about Lucknow itself, there, I feel Lucknow added that nafasat to food itself. Delhi food is not nafis. Delhi food is not delicate. Delhi food tells you about Delhi people.
His prejudice against Delhi needs an immediate resistance. I have spent 62 years of my life as a refugee in Delhi. I don't call myself a Delhi wala, dare not call myself a Delhi wala, because my good friend S.Y. Qureshi, the Chief Executive Election Commissioner, would say, "Tum kab se hoga? Ye to hamari Delhi hai." My other good friend, who's in a bad shape now, O.P. Jain, of the Anand Lok, where we met for the first time, would say, "ये कहाँ के हो गए? दिल्ली तो हमारी थी. हमने तो जामा मस्जिद में 9 जैन मंदिर बना रखे थे उस जमाने में जब मुगलों का राज यहाँ चलता था." Or you would come across a Kayas Mathur, Ravi Mathur, the great editor, and son-in-law to Khushwant Singh, who would smoke beedies. It was reverse snobbery, died of lung cancer, poor chap. Beedi is not to be blamed. Lung cancer is caused, as everybody knows, by imported cigarettes, Virginia tobacco. But he would insist कि ये तो दिल्ली हमारी थी, हमारे जो पुरखे आए थे वो शाहजहाँ के मीर मुंशी हुआ करते थे, and it's very well documented history. So you have the civil lines Mathurs who are better than anybody else in the world. The Kayas are better than world, of course, even otherwise. They blend the Muslim and the Hindu tradition. वो संगम बनाया है उनका. And you would have the Punjabi Muslims. तो मेरे ख्याल में दिल्ली के संग ये जो कह रहे हैं दिल्ली में तहजीब नहीं थी वो थोड़ा गड़बड़ है. वो बेचारा जो मरखब गया अमीर खुसरो, the poor chap who served very opportunistically like most of us, various sultans, गुलाम था, खाकसार था हज़रत निज़ामुद्दीन औलिया का. तो वो सदिया दहलवी भी फीमेल सूफी हुआ करती थी. तो अगर आप ये कहिए कि कव्वाल बच्चे नहीं थे, दिल्ली घराने का म्यूज़िक नहीं था, दिल्ली की ज़ुबान नहीं थी, अब वो लखनऊ की ज़ुबान का हट पंजाबियों से चल सकता है. मजाज ये कह सकते हैं. Are you all right? I hope she's not hurt.
Water? Water?
अभी मिल जाता है ना. तो दिक्कत मुझे लगता है ये है कि लखनऊ became the repository of good manners when the Delhi Sultanate was on its days out and the debauched princes went to take refuge in Faizabad, and when they came back from Lucknow they brought some Lucknowi bawarchis with them. But originally all the Shahi bawarchis, not Bahadur Shah Zafar's reign, before that went to small principalities from Delhi. And जो ज़ुबान उर्दू जिसका इतना फ़ख्र लखनऊ वालों को है, आप मुझे माफ़ करेंगे, मैं तो केले भी काट काट के खाता हूँ, मजदूर मजबूर का फ़र्क मुझे समझ में नहीं आता है. But the point is, उर्दू ज़ुबान was उर्दू किलाए मोहल्ला की ज़बान थी. The language developed in दिल्ली जामा मस्जिद उर्दू बाजार मोहल्ला. तो चाहे वो जुबान हो चाहे वो म्यूजिक की हो. And I will, I mean, as a refugee in Delhi, still resist and say कि दिल्ली ने हर रिफ्यूजी को पनाह दी है. और अगर आप लखनऊ की बात करें तो there is this famous singer Begum Akhtar. She was very fond of food, and in a cookbook called The Cooking Delights of Maharajas, Digvijay Singh ji mentioned a dish called Murg Shikashta Hari Pasand. Now, it would give you the time to think that it was not only the Nawabs of Lucknow who was great connoisseurs of food, it were the Tawayafs who also had patrons who were princes, and for them special dishes were created, like the split breast of murg, which was a favorite of Hari Singh ji. So I would say कि वो मतलब दिल्ली को इतनी जल्दी खारिज मत कीजिए आप.
नहीं नहीं, दिल्ली से प्यार तो मुझे भी है, इक्वली है. But what I meant was, if you think of Delhi versus Lucknow food, and Delhi did give that entire template to everybody. That's what I always give. That Delhi gave the template of multiple things, including the food. Now that food then kept on evolving. तो लखनऊ तक जब तक चलते हुए आ गया, तब तक उसके अंदर extra delicacy add हो गई.
That is what I am resisting. That is what I am protesting. I hope in a civilized manner without being disagreeable. मेरा कहना कि लखनऊ कहाँ था हुजूर, वो तो फैजाबाद था.
Hence I'm giving Delhi the benefit.
अब आप कहिए दिल्ली में हरियाणा भी है तो मैं उसको भी मान लूंगा. फिर तो मतलब ठीक है साहब, फिर तो सभी कुछ चलता है. रहने को घर नहीं है, सारा जहां हमारा हो गया. बट आई वुड से वो अरहर की चुर्रट की रोटी हो या चाट हो, तो चाट तो लखनऊ में किसी ने, गणेशी ने तो ईजाद नहीं की थी, वो तो दिल्ली के चटोरे थे. तो एनीवे विल लेट इट बी.
That's something. That is the beauty of Delhi. But जब वो खाना आगे बढ़ गया कुछ वक्त के बाद, and I think when you have created something already, then you want to better it, and that's what Lucknow added that in many different shape and form. That everything, like for example, and I was having a discussion last week with somebody in Delhi, in Lucknow, that agar ek same dish if you pick up in like a korma, if you pick in Delhi and in Lucknow, and while I was having the Charminar ka korma, was beautiful because uske andar there was no khade masale compared to Lucknow, which is all smooth.
But it is time to have another interruption. Pass it on to Rakesh. This would be true not only of korma, it would be true of sambar. आप सांबार मदुरई में खा रहे हैं, ट्रिप्लिकेन में खा रहे हैं, कपिलेश्वर में खा रहे हैं, कहीं और खा रहे हैं, आप उसके और नीचे चले जाइए, तिरुनेलवेली में खा रहे हैं, तंजावुर में खा रहे हैं. There would be layers of refinement, even of sambar. I think this is what the brainwashing about non-vegetarian food does to us. बड़े गुलाम अली खान साहब जब गाते थे कहते सुर लग गया, मुझे कबाब की महक आ रही है. And I was very worried कि बेचारा जो कबाब नहीं खाता था उसका सुर जब लगता था क्या होता था. And it took a year and a half to learn that भीमसेन जोशी जी का सुर तब लगता था जब उनको somebody said curd rice, उस curd rice में मिट्टी के टूटे टुकड़े में धुंगार का वाला खाना मिलता था या तीखे मसाले का पोहा मिलता था. तो each to his own. It is not कि उन्होंने refine नहीं किया था. Some Maharashtrian Brahmins would probably kill me for this, but there is a poha which is made with the dried shrimps. वो फिशरमैन खाते थे उसे. तो हमको उनके खाने, the food doesn't only evolve because of rich people, not because the courtiers say that they have refined the food. What they do is they try to sell a backstory which is half imaginary and try to sell the same thing again and again because that is what people want to eat.
Sure, that's the thing. The city does it. I've never said, and I don't feel like saying that the Maharaja did it or the royal person did it because most often than not, they probably are not in the kitchen. So city, that's what a city does. It helps you take the same food and changes it based on what the local demands or local food or local palate. And that's why there are many versions of sambar. That's why the many versions of pizza, because there's the local flavor that they want to keep on adding. I think that's what a city does, or that's what I think the Lucknow did to the food.
I think it's a little more complex. We'll get back to you, Rakesh, because have you been to Lucknow recently? You haven't been ever. Go and fall into a tourist trap right away.
We've already made plans.
No, the interesting part is this, those of you who have been to Lucknow recently, there are monuments to the Dalit Chetna constructed by Behan Mayawati. She did a great thing. Had she not done that, Sahara Shri would have got them and developed them into vulgar colonies. She at least has got public places and parks. But the point I'm trying to make is the demography of the city has changed so much in the past 30, 40 years that it is populated by either the Yadavs, who came in hordes with Netaji, Akhilesh's father, or who came with बहन मायावती जी, and between the two of them, वो लखनऊ के सारे नवाब वो जो बेचारे इक्के वैसे पहले भी चलाते थे और ताल्लुकेदार सब फकीर बैठे हुए हैं, and they are living on nothing back but on mythology, which is not like the Institute of Mythology, which is like mythology as opposed to history. So I think that is what needs to be. मगर आपकी बात.
That's exactly what very true. And in fact, in the last 10 years of the change, because I've been going now for almost 15 years, and it keeps on changing. Because every time when people come in, they bring their own people, and then you have. But I feel at least it has enough big spaces. So people who have not been to Lucknow, please visit Lucknow. It's beautiful. um, but that's like when you bring all these older records, and then you understand that entire story. And what you're also mentioning is that all these older Nawabs are now just on. I don't know how they're surviving. There are only few, like I've been visiting now few old Havelis. Um, Either they are running some sort of restaurant in it, boutiques in it, or they are investment bankers somewhere else, so they can pump in the money. But that resistance is there, and that resistance is coming through the food. Now, if you look at how modern days that people are trying to bring back the Lucknow history is through all these social media.
अभी आपको और मौका मिलने वाला है.
हाँ.
We should leave about half an hour for Q&A, and we have almost reached that time. And keeping your flight time in mind and Q&A, I think we'll open it to.
If anybody has questions, just raise your hand and we'll pass on the mics around. Yeah, anybody from the audience? Yeah, somebody from the back there. How has religion affected food all over the country? I think they hinted at that, but maybe one of you want to take? Rakesh? You want?
I think Rakesh can take it, I can chip in, he can chip in. I mean, we are Trimurtis here. And we probably are representing three different religions. He is a believer Hindu, in the Vaishnav tradition, a Shaivite. He is a Muslim, he is 3/4 Muslim like Ghalib. He doesn't eat pork, but the rest of the sins he commits like Ghalib, gambling, drinking, and eating prohibited food. And I'm an atheist, born a Brahmin, so I'm not a believer at all. So I can probably claim to be, but there is prejudice always.
If we look at historical records, I think we have always had a society that has coexisted. I think if you look at some of the ancient records, some of the scriptures, some of ancient literature, it does talk about several communities that today don't eat meat. At one point of time, they did consume meat. So in today's context, there is that whole division that they have created where they do talk about the cow that is very, very sacred and that cannot be consumed, but there are references in the past where it has been. And there are several reasons for why they did that also. So in my opinion, yes, food is used as a tool today to divide people, but I think there are many people in the industry and in people who have been researching and telling the story of food in such a way where we are trying to say that food can only bring people together and not divide.
When religion impacts, I think more than religion and ingredient, I would rather say religion and the way of cooking has impact, right? There was this one small gathering, we were doing potluck, and all of us were supposed to cook only one dish. So we all said, okay, we will make a mutton gravy-based dish, and all of us will make our own way. There was me, and I made korma with dahi. And I realized that in my house, we have never used tomato. And I remember I was in Lucknow, and there's this one lady who passed away recently, Farooq Jafar. Farooq Jafar if you have seen the movie Gulabo Sitabo, anybody? Amitabh Bachchan's wife was Farooq Jafar, and while having the conversation, she said, "Aji छोड़ो टमाटर डाल के कौन खाना बनाता है? वो तो बिल्कुल ही निकम्मू और गधों का खाना है." Because you throw in tomato for quick fix. So मेरे घर में usually, and I believe yogurt adds a lot better flavor. But there was somebody else who used the same thing, gravy base, but with lots of
But
tomato.
would you relate to religion? Would you relate it to religion? Because the
So
question
religion is like this thing. So all of us from different faith kind of had a different ways of making food. So ingredients still remain the same. Of course, you can talk about what is legal, what is not legal, what is halal, what is kosher, and all that. But I think it's also the way you cook food. It's also the techniques, the way you make food, which is what I feel like a religion will tell you that this is, if you're Muslim, you cook it this way. If you're non-Muslim, if you're Christian, so on and so forth. Like a Muslim, you would not necessarily, unless that's a different thing. But you would not necessarily add like a wine in your food. But maybe it's acceptable in other places. Maybe acceptable in a community in tribal Jharkhand.
You know,
I
just
think,
to, sorry.
sorry.
No, just to add, when you're talking about food and religion, I think when you say sacred offerings from across communities, right, like Hindus, Muslims, and Christians, the kind of food that is made on festive occasions, in the case of temples, which is made within the temple premises, what is usually not even mentioned, or people are surprised by when you say that there are temple prasadams even today that are non-vegetarian, right? That is always omitted. It is always not mentioned. You know, when it is a particular day, you always say, oh, no, today is a day where we have to be vegetarian because it's a festive occasion, it's a particular festival. But if you look at the Shakti forms of worship, one of the prasadams that is actually given in temples is ragi kanji, which is a ragi kur as they call it, which is a ragi fermented beverage along with karuvada, which is salted dried fish. You go to Kalighat, the sacrifice there, that is again with animals. So one can never, it's all in the way how it is being projected today, which is given a very sattvic sort of connotation to it. But if you look at ancient history, there, it's not just there, it continues even today.
I would like to add just one brief thing. Your question is absolutely brilliant. The problem with the question is that, not your question, I think my answer to that question or anybody's question is, answer to your question is, what place does religion play in your identity? And what place does religion play in contemporary politics? How many, I said he's a Muslim, he's a Hindu, I'm an atheist. How good a Muslim is he? I described him as 3/4 Muslim like Ghalib. I talked of his Vaishnava lineage and his Shaivite beliefs. Now the problem is this, that, but in India, religion has been one aspect of your identity. Language is another, social class is another, region is another, profession is another, education is one, gender is again. The castes were meat eaters, but their women who cooked meat did not touch meat. The Bengali widows did not eat meat, husbands and male members of the family did. So they created a dish called for themselves called dhoka, which is mimic meat made of dal. So there is this problem. In contemporary India, religion in public life only becomes important when there is political polarization. And then it divides people. Rakesh had very early said, we have happily coexisted with very much religious diversity. Anybody else with a question, comment, disagreement, whatever?
Yeah, just raise your hand. Yeah.
So my main question was, historically, how has food been used to entrench notions of purity, especially in India?
A very interesting question. Before you respond to this, I think purity and pollution go beyond food. There were people from time immemorial, if one may say so, whose touch was polluting because they handled carrions, they skinned dead animals, they carried dead bodies. They were presumably, in pseudo-scientific terms, carrying on an infection of a deadly disease. So you ostracized them. They were outside the pale of the caste system. Their touch was polluting. So it was not food. Their shadow was polluting. The Pariyas in Tamil Nadu or the Dalits in Maharashtra. Then it got transferred to food as well, because what the person originally, by definition, polluted, impure, is touching anything, it becomes impure. So because he handles meat, meat becomes... I'll just add one short story. I'll not add a short story. Please read it for yourself. Shanti Parv, Vishwamitra is stealing a dead dog from the Chandal's house, and the dialogue between the two. So how the Vishwamitra justifies that I am a great sage, my tapas will burn all the pollution. You are a Chandal, you can be, but Chandal was also a very learned man. So the dialogue continues for long. Please read the story. It's very interesting about pollution. There is an apad dharma. To save your life, you can eat anything. And then you can, you can have you'll have to wait for another 144 years to take a dubki in Mahakumbh, but you could, theoretically, you could do it.
Rakesh, you want to come in on it?
Just to sort of add to that, from some of the magnum opus that has been composed many years ago, there was one called Nandanar by Gopal Krishna Bharati. Gopal Krishna Bharati was a poet. He wrote such beautiful evocative verses, and Nandanar was his character. Some people say this is also a true story. So he was an untouchable, and he wanted to catch a glimpse of the Lord in Chidambaram, Nataraja, but he was not allowed inside. He was not even allowed on the 4 roads that are around the temple. So there are references in subtle ways in the Nandanar Charitram, or the story of Nandanar, where there are certain vegetables that are grown in settlements of the untouchables. And that was never consumed by people of the upper caste. One, because like what he said, it was considered impure. Not just they were considered impure, but whatever they grew, it was in that area which was also considered impure. So yes, it definitely is there. But that said, even today, if you go to some parts of Mylapore, a part of Chennai which is very, it still has that slice of, how it used to be maybe about 100, 200 years ago. There are communities that will come out and bring you that particular seasonal green, which only they can identify. But people today buy it, but there is a stigma associated with it, and I think that it should change.
Yeah. There's also an interesting paper by Vegard Iverson in the Contributions to Indian Sociology, which looks at Udupi migrants in Bangalore and how they dealt with purity for a long time. Some question out there.
Greetings, sirs. So, owing to the title on the screen, A Peek in the Pot, which reminds me just a pot full of biryani, and being a Hyderabadi myself, what the question remains to me, which is a pretty big, long question, is how do we explain the origins of biryani? Something that is right here, indigenous to us, or something which has traveled all the way from the Middle East or the Persian cuisines or so on and so forth?
Thank you. Yeah, Sadaf, you want to take that on biryani?
Because I'm Muslim.
Because you make amazing biryani.
How do you know? So actually, so there's always, if you talk about food and we don't talk about biryani, how is that possible? I love it as well. So yeah, I love it. Every city will have their own version. Every house will have their own version. My version is mix of Hyderabad and Calcutta, which basically means I throw in potato in that and no eggs, but it's a spicy word. It has traveled, and if you're asking how can there be so many versions, we were talking about this earlier today itself. The word itself did not really exist for as early like 100 years maybe. There's a description in Badhu Shah Zafar's book, which is not biryani. Birinj Biryani Pulao. There is the guy who gets the credit of making biryani, Shah Jahan. His book has Zair Birinj. Akbar never had biryani, not because he was allergic to biryani, but there was no biryani in his life. So biryani didn't exist in that time. But if you think of biryani as a version to, again, a technique, then it's a technique of roasting things, right? So biryani in Hosu biryani or Dendugul biryani or the Done biryani, for me becomes, or Lucknow's pulao, basically becomes a similar area versus then you have the Hyderabad where you're roasting. So if you think of roasting things, it could be anything. By the vegetable biryani also exists, yes. Shah Jahan's wife did it. She wrote biryani, paneer biryani. So if you think of a technique of a biryani that it means roasting, then you can have different templates. It's like imagine you're working in a corporate office. A comms and HR person sends you a template and says, hey, listen, this is the template that you go and pitch to your clients, right? But you can fix your template as you want. Whoever you're like, customize it based on the person you're pitching it to. So it's the same thing which every city has. Every state has their own version of biryani. You get the template, which is mix of spice, rice, and everything nice, and then you get biryani, and then you customize it.
Pushpesh, you want to add?
It's a pizza of.
I know why only single out biryani. Why not कि आपको आलू का दम किसका अच्छा लगता है बंगाली आलू दम कश्मीरी आलू दम बनारसी आलू दम जयपुरी आलू दम why not a simple आलू दम which in hills is made with no masala broken pieces of red chilies a pinch of namak haldi and done in a cast iron kadhai how brilliant it tastes if made rightly I mean you need the skills to turn out anything to perfection. My ustad, Chef Farooq, used to tell me at one stage, all this fancy food, kormas and biryanis, are रईसों के चोचले हैं, गरीबों की रोटियां हैं. The chefs have conned the world into believing that these are great dishes. Talking of biryani, he has given the clue. Everybody who loves or hates biryani would like to taste a biryani once, including the Muradabadi veg biryani. So everybody is laughing their way, the chefs are laughing their way to the whatever small postal bank they have.
Next question.
Sir, I think my question would be more of a continuation for the discussion that you were just having. Oftentimes, when we talk about history, to be more specific, culinary history, we often look for the authenticity. So, my question is, what is authentic? When you talk about Lucknowi biryani or the food, it is very specific. So what is authenticity?
I think there's a brilliant person sitting here who's been talking about meaning of words and his session will come. What does the word authenticity mean? Before we say ki authentic kya hai? Something cooked in your house, which is in your DNA of your palate of taste, is authentic for you. Is not authentic for me. You say ki, oh, this is way the French did it. We had a Korean pancake last night, brilliantly made. I gorged myself for it. And I said, it's called Korean pancake. Why is it being called a Korean pancake? It is like a chila or a pita with a little mixture of egg in it. And it went off beautifully with what you detest, chili oil. And we did not have mayonnaise, but we didn't have cheese. But it was very nice. So I think why do we get stuck with authenticity of a dish? There is a very nice verse from Kalidas. Kshane kshane jannavatam upaiti tadaiva rupam ramaniyataya. The truly beautiful is the thing which unfolds a new aspect of its attractiveness with each passing moment. Why not enjoy that?
So, but while we are having general conversations with, let's say, our parents or our friends, we often say, oh, this is authentic. I wish we could have gone back to those times or brought such kind of a food. So we always tend to subconsciously go back to that authenticity
No,
or bring.
forgive me, you are being very personal. I don't think this personal anecdotage stands the test of historical data because this conversation has never taken place in our house where my mother could never dare tell me what was authentic. She was born in Saurashtra. She only politely said, can you get me some Gila Kokam for Mohanlal Sindhi? Because there was no Kathiawadi in Delhi there. Or she would say, get somebody going to Ahmedabad, Dhanani Dal and Shekadi Chupari. I was raised on Giju Bhaini Chopadiyo, Popat Khatu Nathi, Popat Shutu Nathi. But it doesn't make me the arbiter of the taste of Gujarati today. Dhokla aapka acha hai, locha kiska acha hai, Kashi nu maran, Surat nu jaman, all these are traps to put you into a double bind trying to discuss food.
Very true, because when you say authentic, right, like I think what you are talking more about during dinner conversations is more nostalgia driven. Like there is nothing in the world of food, there is nothing called authentic because as we speak today, food is evolving. Right? I mean, I'll give you the example of the pineapple menskai, which is made in Karnataka. This is made in the Udupi mud. This was a fusion recipe for back in the day because pineapple was not even native here. Red chilies, you can't imagine a sambar being made without red chilies, but only pepper is what we had. But this was a fusion that happened back in the day. So there are several such recipes, like you can't imagine the ingredients that go into were not even part of the culinary fabric. So it's, you know, it's so fluid that there is nothing called authentic. The Kumbakonam degree coffee, many people don't even know what degree is. You tell them, degree, I've asked people in Kumbakonam serving that coffee saying, what is Kumbakonam degree coffee? They'll say, oh, the milk has to be heated to a particular degree. It's not true. Back in the day, when they were measuring the quality of milk, it was measured, and that degree, that particular measurement of quality and purity was called degree. That is why it is called Kumbakonam degree coffee. Right? So there is nothing called authentic, because, I mean, who knows, maybe, 10 years from now, kiwi rasam and goji berry chutney will probably be part of the wedding menu. We never know that. I mean, there is pineapple rasam today, which is part of almost all wedding menus. That was a fusion that happened back in the day, and there is nothing called an authentic pineapple rasam.
Sadaf, you want to go?
Agreed. my answer same. The word authentic, again, what Pansa was talking about with regards to chefs, we have created that, to be honest. Because, for example, the dish that you ate, what did you eat in the morning?
I had samosa.
Samosa, okay. Wow. Okay, so the samosa you had today versus the samosa you'll have tomorrow will not be authentic. Why? Because of things which will change. The aloo might change, the flame probably will change, the person who's frying it might also change. So that authenticity changes every day. The word authentic is just like throwing the name Shahi. You know what Shahi means? Nothing. It's just anything which has dry fruits in it. Because you poor people can't have dry fruits. Here's the stuff with dry fruits and it's called Shahi. That's simple as that. So authentic, good flavor, yes. So if parents are saying, oh, it doesn't taste like that, mostly because they're talking about, one, is that the ingredients are not the same. It doesn't taste anymore the same. Or second, because whoever's cooking the food in the kitchen is not putting in so much of hardship, and they're just calling it from Zepto. Something of that sort is happening. And hence the word authentic is not authentic to itself anyway. It's just a word just to overtly romanticize a food. If you ever go to a restaurant, or any sort of, Bangalore has a lot of pop-ups happening these days as well. If you ever go to those places and the menu description says authentic XYZ, just don't go there. You're just overselling it for no reason.
Okay, maybe one last authentic question. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Can I rephrase the question she asked?
Yes.
If I asked each of you to curate a meal as it would be served, let's say, in the early 16th century, would you be able to do it today with ingredients only available in the early 16th century?
I will speak for myself. If it were a temple food, yes, it can be done. There is an unbroken tradition of 1300 years of recipes cooked in Jagannath temple, Chappan Bhog, 8 prahar, 7 days a week, 7, 8 are 56. 2 mahine ki ritu hai. Multiply it, goes up like the memory of a computer. Then there are special occasions and the Dhupa Aartis. Those have not changed. They are what Dr. Achaya would say, may his soul rest in peace, pre-Columbian exchange. That can be done. But a no non-temple meal probably can be done.
I was going to quote the temple prasadams as well, because there are these inscriptions in temples like in Tirupati and Srirangam that give you detailed information of the prasadams that should be made, which hour it should be served, at the gong of the bell, number of people required to make it, the quality of ingredients that should be used. And if you go back, like even Agama Shastra, it talks about the consecration of the temple, which direction, all of that. So those, while the quality of ingredients may have drastically changed, I think fairly the recipes remain the same, except I would say where they have started using red chilies that were really not part of, what we would use for spice. It was pepper that was predominantly used. But I think there has been a change. There have been a few departures here and there, but if you look at some of these, temples that have the bandwidth to sustain and that are also affluent, I think they have fairly remained intact.
My question would be actually to you. Would you be able to eat that food? Because in many of my researches of older documents, and I've tried making dishes as well, not exaggerating, for the lack of better word, I would like to say, बहुत ही वाहियात taste करेगा वो.
He's again speaking for himself.
No, because I remember I was making once, there was this one kebab that I was making. Brilliant kebab. But the only problem with that kebab is that, and especially, for example, if we now, with kebab, you want like, with flavors, for example, you want, and I always think, and because Pansab likes music, I always think of flavors as music notes. There are bass notes, there are top notes, right? it's like a jazz music. Every ingredient plays their own tune, and then everything comes together and makes sense. Um, Now, one kebab I was making, and this only had black pepper as a seasoning and a couple of other things. And it was very flat to me. And I tried it. Then I also made something which had a lot of veg, little bit of meat. Interesting for me to have, but would it, and again, seasoning only so much. So a couple of these older document texts that I have used, I feel like the food that we are having is quote unquote shahi in that sense, has more ingredients now.
All I can say is that we've been going to wrong documents. Had you
All
gone
that.
to authentic documents,
All
the
that.
Vajat Khana would not have gone down your gullet. And the musical analogy is a rather odd one because music का मजा एक नोट का ही नहीं है. आप सम पे जब होते हैं या मूर्छना जब होती है या गमक होती है मीड़ होती है. What we are discussing, the input from Kannada music, Karnataka music to North Indian music. Aladiya Khan Sahab disciple dying in South. Hindol में क्या कर रहा है? Hansa Dhwani में क्या कर रहा है? I mean, the point is, अरहर की दाल के जो मज़े हैं, बिना छौंकी, and the Jagannath temple doesn't have chonk and tadka because the aroma going into the nostrils of soup cars would pollute it. So consecrated food is not tampered with. But we'll continue this discussion. You have a flight to catch. I will blame everything on him.
Great. Thank you so much. This has been an absolutely cracker of a session. Sadaf, as I told you in the beginning, curates dining experiences, spotlighting Bihar and Jharkhand's lesser-known cuisine. So hopefully all of us get to taste this food someday. Pushpesh ji is writing books as prolifically as some of us eat meals. So keep writing your books on a variety of themes. And Rakesh, all the best for all the amazing work you're doing in research and content, curation on and being a South Indian culinary ambassador. As you could see, there's a lot of north, south, east, west kind of banter on the stage. He's a Indian.
Don't restrict his area of operations as South Indian ambassador. I think he's the only one who's thinking about food in India holistically, music and architecture and literature and folklore. And I feel quite timid when he's around.
Fantastic. Also amazing to learn about Chennai, Lucknow, Delhi, and so many other cities. In Bengaluru, which, as I understand, is named after Bendakaluru, which is a town of boiled beans. So a city which derives its name from food. It's only apt that we start the festival with this poignant note. Thank you so much. May I invite Professor Rakesh Basan to give mementos to our esteemed speakers. We will begin the session in exactly 5